The US Attorney General Pam Bondi passionately defended US President Donald Trump and the US Justice Department's handling of the Epstein files during a heated 4-hour-long congressional hearing. Bondi deflected lawmakers' questions about the DOJ's investigation into the crimes committed by the late sex offender and his long list of alleged high-profile friends and accomplices, many of whom are redacted in the documents. However, sensitive private information about several victims, several survivors of the late sex offender, was not blacked out. Some were present at the hearing and at one point were asked if their evidence had been included in the ongoing investigation.
Now, would the survivors and victims who are here please stand up one more time? Just by show of hands, how many of you or your loved ones actually have met with the Department of Justice and provided testimony and estimate and evidence? None. And of those of you who have not met, which is everyone, how many of you have reached out either individually or through a lawyer or representative to offer to provide testimony and evidence? All of them. And of those of you, all of you who have reached out, how many of you were denied or ignored by the Department of Justice? All of them.
Now, in her opening statement, Bondi said she'd spent her life fighting for victims and will continue to do so. Let's take a closer look at all of this with Dr. Mark Shanahan. He's an Associate Professor of Political Engagement at the University of Surrey in the UK. Welcome to DW. Now, we just saw there all of the survivors at the hearing saying they hadn't been contacted by the Department of Justice and that they received no reply when they themselves contacted the department. This seems slightly extraordinary. Would the Department of Justice not be compelled to be in touch with the survivors?
They should be, given the amount of evidence that they had. I mean, particularly since the death of Epstein. Investigations into him have been going on for 20 years now, long before he allegedly took his life in 2019. But since that time in 2019, when Trump was president, there have been many calls for investigations into his actions. I mean, he was awaiting trial. There was a lot of evidence was building up of his sex trafficking, of his interactions with underage girls, of his involving so many important and powerful men, older men largely, in his activities. So there was no reason for the DOJ not to reach out. It didn't really happen under that first Trump administration. But there again, it also didn't happen under Joe Biden, when, again, all of this information was available, but it wasn't being acted on by the government's chief prosecutors.
In her opening statement, we heard Attorney General Pam Bondi call on survivors of Epstein and his associates to contact the FBI. Given the FBI, as we've been talking about, is thought to have extensive information on suspected abusers already, what can we take from that? Is Pam Bondi serious about persecuting the perpetrators of this abuse?
Before President Trump was re-elected, he was pushing for a full release of the Epstein files and the full weight of the law to come down on perpetrators, because at that time he believed that it would pick off many of his political enemies. There were particular people on the Democrat side that he felt would be implicated in the wrongdoings of Epstein. When he came into office, he did a complete 180 on this. He changed his tune, probably realizing that many of the people implicated in those files were his friends, his business contact, or friends of friends. Never mind what those files say about Trump himself. So what we are seeing from Bondi, whose main job is to defend the presidency, is to deflect, to delay, to take the sting out of what has become political kryptonite for this administration. There are many people associated with the administration who are in those files. We don't know whether there is evidence of wrongdoing, but they are there. What she seems to be doing is protecting them rather than investigating the wrongdoing to the survivors and giving them justice.
Do you think the public will ever get access to the unredacted files, which include the names of potential perpetrators?
Not under this administration. What they are getting is a very carefully edited, carefully curated release. Perhaps not carefully curated enough in that there are far too many instances where the names of the victims are being released. There are 500 people in the DOJ going through these documents. They are redacting seemingly more of the names of the men involved than the women who were abused through Epstein's actions and those of the circle around him. It may change when Trump is no longer in office, and if, for instance, we have a Democrat administration in the future. But Epstein was corrosive, and that corrosive action covered all sides of the political spectrum among the rich and the powerful. So it may be that a Democrat administration is no more likely to fully release the documents than this current administration.
What about the public pressure that's building, though? I mean, there are thought to be over 2 million other files that haven't been released by the DOJ at all. I mean, do you see enough pressure building for those to be released, for at the very least for the spotlight to continue to be shone on this?
Yeah, I mean, certainly you'll have the likes of Congressman Raskin and Congressman Massey and other figures in Congress who will be pushing for more hearings around this, who will be pushing for the Transparency Act, the Epstein Papers Transparency Act of November 2025, to be fully implemented. It's not at the moment. But the kind of hearing we saw yesterday is much more about political theatre and political sparring from both sides than really getting to the nub of the issues. It's probably going to take more legislative action, perhaps more action in the courts, in order for the DOJ to speed up the admittance of these files into the public domain, and to do so in a way that protects those who are innocent and exposes those who were involved in nefarious acts.
Dr. Mark Shanahan from the University of Surrey, thank you so much for your time and your perspective on this.
Thank you.